Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my series of building a REST API completely from scratch, following clean architecture and domain-driven design principles. I do have a quick disclaimer before we begin. So I am a Microsoft employee, and these are Microsoft technologies, but I'm not talking on behalf of Microsoft. These are my personal opinions. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So in part 1, we started setting up a bit of authentication. Today, we're going to take it a step further and implement the Jwt Token Generator. We'll then use the options pattern to inject the JWT settings, and then we'll see how we can use the .NET user secrets feature to store our secrets during development. So this is a pretty cool feature which many .NET developers aren't aware of, so I hope you're going to like that. And lastly, we're going to sneak peek debugging in Visual Studio Code, which we'll go into more in depth in part 3. All right, so we had the two endpoints, which make a request to the authentication controller, and from there to the authentication service in the application layer. Today, what we're going to be doing is using the Jwt Token Generator, which from the point of view of the application layer is just using the interface, getting a token and returning it to the user. But the actual implementation sits over here in the infrastructure layer. Okay, so as we said, over here in the application layer, we're going to be defining our interface. And over here in the infrastructure, we're going to have the implementation. And when configuring our services, then we'll wire everything up over here in the dependency injection inside the infrastructure layer. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is create a common folder where inside here we'll have all of our interfaces. Let's go ahead and create also authentication inside here. And here we'll define our interface. So Jwt Token Generator. Okay, so public interface. Yes, that. And let's give it a single method. Yes, generate token. But this is a GUID. And let's also give it the first name and the last name. Yes, that looks good. Next, let's go to the authentication service and already use it as if it works. So in the actual result, what we want to do here is first check if user already exists. Yes, that's what I want to do, right? So we have the email, which is unique. We want to check in the database that there isn't a user with the same email. If yes, then we don't want to register the user again. So that's the first thing we want to do. Then we want to create a user, where as part of this, we'll generate a unique ID, right? So generate unique ID. And then create the token. So let's go ahead and use the Jwt Token Generator interface that we just defined. So private, read-only, Jwt Token Generator, yes. This, thank you. Let's inject it in the constructor and use it over here, right? So var token equals, yes, that seems right. And let's actually pull this to a variable. All right, let's call this user ID. Put it over here, and this is just an intermediate implementation. Right, and then we can return the token from here. Okay, next, we want to go to the infrastructure layer and create here authentication. Over here, we'll have the implementation, Jwt Token Generator. Yes, capital, and Jwt Token Generator. Yes, let's implement the interface. And okay, so what do we want here? First of all, we want our claims. Start with that. So yes, gotta love GitHub Copilot. Yes, okay, now this isn't recognized, so let's see where this comes from. So Control-Shift-P, reverse package search. And here it is. So let's go ahead and add that. So .NET add to the infrastructure project, the package, system, that identity model. Yes. Now that we have that, let's add it. Here, let's put the user ID. All right, this is just a random GUID. And let's also add here the given name, and the last name, family name, where this will be the first name, and this will be the last name, right? So last name. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is create the security token. So let's go ahead and say security token equals new JWT security token, and let's give it the claims. This, of course, isn't enough. We want to also sign the token. So let's go ahead and create the signing credentials. This will be yes, yes. Let's add this and this. This needs to be at least 256 bits. So that's 16 bytes. So let's go ahead and do super secret key, which is exactly 16, right? And let's go ahead and add it over here. So signing credentials, signing credentials. The next thing we want to do is add the issuer. So in this case, we're the issuer. Let's say issuer, and let's say yes, it's us. Let's say expires in, yeah, why not? For now, we're going to change this soon. And obviously we don't want to use datetime, so soon we'll replace this with an injected iDatetime provider. And that's it. Let's return it. Return. Yes, thank you. And I have a typo here. Let's fix this. Signing, yes, seems right. Okay, so I just want to note that over here we're using a symmetric key, and that's because we're basically acting both as the token issuer, and later we're going to be authenticating the users. So it makes sense that we'll just use a symmetric key because we're just going to be storing the secret in our service. We'll use it also for generating the tokens and later for verifying the tokens. But I'm guessing that in your company, you probably have an identity server which is in charge of this stuff. You're using AAD or another solution. But this is only to demonstrate the separation of logic between the layers. So that's why I chose to add this. It's less about the actual implementation. That's why I'm not going to be explaining too much about what we're doing over here, what claims are, and so on. So now that we have all of this set up, so let's go ahead and register it over here. So services, add Singleton, and yes. Let's add this from the application layer, right? And this from the infrastructure layer. And that seems about right. Let's try building the project, see that it works. Let's run it, .NET run. Let's make a register request. Okay, and it seems to work. We have here our token. Now what we can do, actually, there's an extension called JWT something. So let's see what it does. Let's select the token, Control-Shift-P, and click JWT decoder. So it basically decodes the token. And as we expect, let's go back to the Jwt Token Generator. We can see that we have here what we expected to have, right? So we have here our claims, right? So this corresponds to these over here. Then we have our expiration date, which corresponds to this, and the issuer, which is Boober Dinner, which corresponds to this. Okay, now one more thing about this plugin. So for some reason, when you use it in this window, let's just paste it over here, and you select it and run JWT decoder, then it doesn't paste it over here, but rather now when you hover over it, then you can see what it has inside. So I'm not sure why this behavior is like this, but it is what it is. And another thing you can do, so if you're not loving this and you're used to using jwt.io, so you can actually use another extension, VS Browser, which, believe it or not, this one over here, allows you to open a web browser inside Visual Studio Code. So let's see what this looks like. So VS Browser, start browser, and I actually have it set up to SharpLab.io, so I can just go over here and use it, which is nice. But in our case, we want to go to jwt.io. And let's make this a bit bigger. Let's copy and paste our token. And Boom. If you're using Visual Studio, you might be saying, oh, come on. But it's a nice gimmick, right? Okay. Now that we have that all set up, let's go ahead and instead of using over here the datetime, let's use the interface. Let's go to the application layer and define here another folder, call it services. And in here, let's create the datetime provider. This is going to be yes, only UTC now. I would recommend either using UTC now like this or using datetime offset and now. So whichever one you prefer. And let's go ahead and implement it over here in the infrastructure layer. So services and datetime provider. Public class datetime provider. Yes, that's what we want. Let's add this, perfect. And now let's define it over here. So services dot add Singleton and yes, thank you. So again, the interface is from the application layer and the actual implementation is over here in the infrastructure layer. Let's go ahead and use it over here in the Jwt Token Generator. Private read-only datetime provider. Datetime provider. Let's go ahead and inject it. And over here, we can use it, right? So datetime provider dot UTC now dot add, let's say minutes, 60. Something like that. Okay, let's just make sure that this works. So .NET run. Let's make a request. And it still seems to work. Great. Okay, so we finished part one. Now, instead of using these values over here, let's use the options pattern to get these values instead of hard coding them over here. So let's go to the app settings. So it sits over here in the API. Okay, so let's go ahead and create here a new section called Jwt settings. And yes, although we don't actually want here the values. Expiry minutes, let's have this a number, not a string. Issuer, yes, and audience. So we didn't actually add an audience in the current implementation, right? But we should probably add it. So let's go ahead and add it over here. Let's copy this to the development app settings. Over here, let's put the super secret key from over here. Expiry minutes, we have it over here defined as 60. So let's copy and paste this over here. Issuer was Boober Dinner. Let's copy and paste this over here. And the audience, let's say also Boober Dinner. Okay, so now that we have these values, let's create an object to model it. So Jwt settings.cs, public class Jwt settings, and yes. Although, let's open this side by side. Right, so we have our secret, we have expiry minutes, we have the issuer and the audience. Great. Let's change all these sets to init. And because we have nullable reference types enabled, so we got to tell the compiler, don't worry, well, this won't be null. And now let's go ahead and configure it over here. So to access this section, let me just close all of this. So to access the section that we just defined, we need to use the configurations. So let's go back to the program CS. Let's just close everything so it's more organized. Let's go to the program CS, and when we're calling the infrastructure, let's pass the configuration, which is available under builder.configuration. And let's add this as a parameter. Let's wrap this so it's visible. And this isn't recognized, so let's see where it belongs to. So Control-Shift-P, reverse package search. And the first one is what we want. So Microsoft.extensions configuration. So let's go ahead and add that. Let's stop our service. .NET add to the infrastructure project. We want to add the package Microsoft dot extensions dot configuration. Okay, now this should be recognized. Yes, let's get rid of this and add this using statement. And now we can go ahead and configure it. So services dot configure. Yes, this is Jwt settings. So configure actually sits in another package. So let's see where it comes from. So this is the one that we want, actually, not the first one. So Microsoft.extensions.options.configuration extensions. Let's go ahead and add that. So .NET add to the infrastructure project the package Microsoft dot extension dot options dot configuration extensions. Great, let's give it a moment. Okay, so what this line over here does is basically it adds the iOptions interface where we can request the Jwt settings, and we'll see how we'll use it in a moment. Another thing I want to do, I saw a nice trick. Instead of having this string defined over here, since this object is modeling this section, let's move this as a constant over there. So let's go over here to authentication, Jwt settings, and let's say public const string section name, yes, thank you, and Jwt settings section name. Great. Now, in the future, we'll look how we can reorganize this stuff a bit so it's more organized, because as the project grows, then this will become very cluttered. There's a few tricks that we can do. We'll just explore some of them, but that's it in a later video. Okay, so let's go back to the token generator and use the settings. So private read-only, yes. Let's inject it. But as we said, this will be available under the iOptions, capital O. Let's change the name to options, and over here, let's get the value, which is this over here. One of the reasons this is great is that now we can easily mock this in our unit tests. So let's go ahead and use it. So all of these places we want to replace with this, yes, secret key, I think it's called secret. Let's replace this with the issuer. Let's also add here the audience. And let's replace this with expiry in minutes. And I think that's it, right? Yes, looks about right. Let's make sure this still works. Make a request. And great, it still works. So we can decode it and see that we have all of our values, including the new audience that we just added. Now we're moving on to the last part of this video, which is we can actually get rid of this value over here and add it using the .NET user secrets feature. So let's see how we can use that. So I actually want to go to here so you can see it added in real time. So .NET user secrets init, and we need to tell it which project. And what this does is it adds this value over here, and it creates some file behind the scenes, if I'm not mistaken. And then when we add now data, you'll see it's key value pairs, then it's stored in that file, and then override the configurations. So let's see what this looks like. .NET user secrets set in the project API. We want to set, so it's Jwt settings and secret, right? So this matches this route over here with a colon between them. And now we need to give it the value. So let's say super secret key from user secrets secrets. Okay, and here we can see that this was added successfully. And we can actually also do, instead of set, we can have this list. And let's get rid of this over here. And list all of the secrets that we stored. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see how this behaves. And I actually want to put a breakpoint in our token generator to see that this actually works. So let's put a breakpoint over here. And let's make a request. Okay, so it works, but we didn't hit the breakpoint. And that's because we're just running the project from the command line, and it's running in a different process. If we want to attach to the running process, then we need to do the following things. Over here in the run and debug. So when creating the project, you might have a little notification here that says missing assets, blah, blah. You can click here to add them. So if you did that, then great. If you haven't, then you could just click over here to create a launch JSON file. And in future videos, we'll dive deeper into what this does. But just for the moment, you'll see this adds two options over here, .NET Core Attach and the .NET Core Launch, which corresponds to this option over here and this option over here. And what we want to do is attach the process, right? So let's choose Attach and click Play or F5. And here we need to choose the process we want to attach to. So that will be Boober Dinner. Okay, so now that we have the debugger attached, let's make a request again. So the register, let's make the request, we hit the breakpoint, and over here, we can see that the secret is really the value that we put in the user secrets. So pretty cool. And here, there are many options for debugging. So we'll talk about this in the future videos. That's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and have a better understanding on how to separate your logic between the application layer and the infrastructure layer. I just want to know that this is really the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to be doing in this project. We're going to be covering many concepts, especially domain-driven design concepts, when we continue in the series. So if you're loving this content, please make sure to subscribe. And I have a very exciting announcement. I want to thank my very first Patreon, ErrorOr. Thank you so much for supporting me. I love you. And our son, it's my wife, if you didn't get it. So that's it, and I'll see you in the next one.